Hey, everyone. Hoping everyone is good. Hoping everyone is great. Hoping that it's starting to warm up in wherever you are. I will say that the weather is beautiful. I hope we're over the fluctuation of temperature changes for sure. I feel like I'm really getting, into the space of this little time change. I'm going to tell you, this year, it was a little harder than it was previous years. I don't know the difference, but I feel like I've finally become acclimated to it. So, acclimation, good weather, that's a good feeling. So for this episode, I want to take a different approach than we normally do. We can get into a little bit of schooling, a little bit of education, a little bit of foundational things that I feel like we all should know. Now, while I do caution against many times labeling such a thing, because sometimes when we label a thing, we feel like it has no variances. People define themselves by that very label. But there are certain things in labeling which helps us learn a lot about ourselves. And so for this week and next week, we're going to be talking about attachment styles. Now, the two that we're going to talk about is anxious and avoidant. These are particularly, I wouldn't say finicky attachment styles, but they get a bad rap for how they show up. And if coupled together, an anxious person and avoidant, whether that is in a relationship with love or, parenting or family ships, there will be a dynamic that will become a struggle eventually. So without further ado, my babies, we're going to go through this. Now, my only hope is that I want you to kind of approach this conversation with some form of curiosity, and I don't want you to judge you. I don't want you to judge someone that, the avoidant or the anxious attachment may describe about another person. Now, attachment is just simply the pattern you develop around closeness, around safety, around connection. And, most of the time, you don't consciously choose it. You have adapted it based on what you experienced early on or what felt necessary for you to maintain for your sense of emotional stability. So whenever we're talking about anxious and avoidant attachment, we're not talking about personality types. We're talking about patterns or a response, especially when something is uncertain. So we'll begin with the anxious attachment style. So the anxious attachment style, it's primarily rooted in some form of heightened awareness of connection and also a sensitivity to change within that connection, which means, you are someone who may feel deeply, you'll pay attention very closely and respond very quickly when something feels different. So in other words, to kind of break it down, if you have an anxious attachment style, you feel really grounded when things are steady. But when something shifts or is not aligned, or you just know when something is off, it lingers in your mind and you start to try to understand what changed and why. You begin to go kind of in panic mode. So the way for you to understand what that looks like for you, many times you'll begin to overthink. You'll increase your checking in to people, or you need a strong desire for reassurance. And especially in those moments where you do not have clarity about something, I'll give you a situation. Anxious attachment looks like texting someone and normally getting a text like right back or within a decent time frame. And when that person doesn't text you back and they leave longer spaces, it puts you in a spiral of confusion where you start to overthink, did I do something wrong? Did I say something wrong? Did I word it the wrong way? What's going on? Like your mind goes into overdraft and you begin to overthink. You'll also have moments of pause where you try to decide whether you should send another text or if you should call, because the unclearness of what just happened in the space of not receiving a text sends you into overdrive. So particularly in relationships, if you have an anxious attachment style, you may find that your mood is influenced by the state of your relationships. And when I say relationships, again, I want to put this under, this is an umbrella. Relationships can fall under parenting. It can fall, into relationships of love, family members, friendships. So again, when we speak of relationships, it applies to whatever goes under that umbrella. So it's influenced by the way that it shows up in your relationship, especially the people that you care about the most. And when something feels off, it can be difficult for a person who has the anxious attachment style to focus on anything else, because they need a sense of reassurance and also some form of resolution quickly. That's the key word. You're also a giver. You give more than you receive many times. And it doesn't necessarily mean you don't have boundaries, because giving feels like a way to maintain closeness and prevent disconnection. And with anything, and especially with anxious attachment, over time it becomes very exhausting, because you are the type of person who is constantly trying to read, you're trying to respond, and you're trying to adjust your emotional shifts that may or may not be clearly communicated. So to make this specific, in friendships, anxious attachment mirrors something like you're the type of person who checks in often. You remember very important details about your friend or situations. You value consistency in communication. But it can also look like feeling unsettled when a friend becomes very distant with you. They cancel plans, or they change their level of engagement with you without any explanation. Again, going back to the example that I gave, they didn't text you right when you thought that they needed to, because normally they text back fast, and your brain tells you that something is wrong. Now in parenting, this can show up as you being a very, very highly attentive and emotionally invested parent, sometimes to the point where you closely monitor your child's emotional state, and you feel the responsibility for maintaining their happiness and their stability. While it can, really create a strong bond, it can also show up so intense that your child may not want to be close to you, because it's almost like you suffocate the person unknowingly, not doing it, in a derivative way to cause harm, but definitely you become a smother. And as the result, as that child begins to pull back, now again, it spins you into the mode of instability, because you've always had a control over the situation. So when someone pulls away from you, you begin to overthink, you become overwhelmed at the way that the child shows up in the relationship that you have set forth. And you go back into the cycle again of overthinking, rehashing situations, trying to figure out how it could be much better, and also taking back control of the situation, because again, anxious attachment styles always need some form of clarity. Now, let's get into the avoidant attachment style. I think out of all of the styles, perhaps this one is the one that takes the hardest hit, because even on the onset, of saying avoidant, you already know, like, it already has like a negative connotation to it. But this one is important, and it's important to recognize if you have a parent who has an avoidant attachment style, if you have a partner, if your child is this way, and if you are with someone in a relationship that shows up this way. It's important if you are the person and also the person on the other side observing this. This is education, so that, number one, you look out for the clear signs of how a person is, but more importantly, if you are the person who identifies as such, you understand yourself much more. My babies. The avoidant attachment style is rooted in, this need to maintain this kind of independence, and you got to have some kind of internal stability. So that shows up as situations where closeness begins to feel overwhelming or consuming. Many times, avoidant attachment styles like their own space. I'm going to repeat that again. Most people who identify as avoidant attachment styles love their own space. Because see, a person who has an avoidant attachment style, they control themselves. They control their environment. They control how close they want to get to a person, when, how. They control the narrative, which keeps them in their mind safe. I'll give you an example. So let me give you an example in correlation to friendship. Let's say it's Brandy and Monica, baby. Simple. So let's say that Brandy and Monica meet at a coffee shop, just a random. They don't know each other. And as they begin to have small talk, they recognize that they have similar interests. They like the same type of music. They like art. They just like the same type of things. But in conversation, Monica tells Brandy, well, she likes these things, but she doesn't like a lot of people and she rarely goes out. So Brandy suggests, hey girl, it's a concert going on next Thursday. I bought 2 tickets. My friend couldn't go. Would you like to go with me? Well, Monica accepts. So as the time comes near, Brandy texts Monica on a Wednesday just to ensure that she's coming. Monica says yes. They go out, they have a great time, and they talk about doing something the following week, maybe to go to an art show. So in the in-between of that experience of the concert and also coming into going to the art show, Brandy is texting Monica, and Monica engages, but she is a slow engager. As the days go by and it gets closer to the art show, Brandy loves that she has found what looks like friendship in Monica. But Monica is being a little hesitant because Brandy is a person who likes communication. Now Monica goes with Brandy to the art show and they enjoy themselves. They have a great time, and Brandy again suggests, hey, let's just hang out. Let's go to the coffee shop. Let's just talk. Monica says, okay, well, let me check my schedule. Monica recognizes that perhaps in the space in which she's had before, she's always been to herself. And Brandy is now seeking friendship. Because Monica can't or wants to control the narrative, and she recognized that Brandy is more fluent in communication and friendship and hanging out. Monica feels drawn back. And as the days go by, Brandy doesn't hear from Monica, and so she does just a soft checking in. Hey, just making sure everything is okay. And Monica does not respond. Monica now recognizes that she cannot keep up with what Brandy wants in a friendship. And the days go by, and Monica does not text Brandy back. A person who has an avoidant attachment style doesn't necessarily mean harm. Again, it is influenced by how they have curated and lived their life. So instinctually, what it becomes is closeness can start to feel like a loss of control. And so a person, Monica, begins to create distance in order to regulate herself. And again, this does not mean that they don't care for people that they don't really like deeply or want to get to know. But those emotions come from a place that is internal. And they tend to process things more privately than outwardly. You also have to keep in mind when something becomes emotionally intense or requires some form of vulnerability at a level that feels uncomfortable, their response is to step back. Either that's physically, emotionally, or both. Now, on an individual level, what does that look like? So when a person leans more into being an avoidant, they may pride themselves in just being self-sufficient, independent woman, independent man, and they are capable of going inside and kind of handling and tackling issues by themselves. So they're not heavily dependent on other people. They become their own emotional support. And they may also find themselves in situations where if something is complex emotionally, their first instinct is to create a space so that they can think clearly and regain their sense of balance. But at the same time, they may struggle with expressing their emotions consistently, or just allowing others to see fully what they are seeing. So it's almost like innately they have a mask. It's like having the poker face, right? So underneath all of that, like everything about them looks put together and they're good. But underneath that, they're not going to allow you to go anywhere piercing the surface of who they are. And so also to go back to the example of Monica or Brandy and Monica, in those friendships, avoiding attachment, it's being present and engaged, but also just needing space, especially if the friendship begins to feel very emotionally draining or it seems to require constant communication. If you are the type of person, you may very much have a strong connection, but you need to maintain a level of independence within them. And if a friend begins to rely heavily on you, especially in an emotional way, you may feel the need to pull back. And in parenting, now, avoiding attachment can show up as you encouraging independence and resilience and wanting your children to be self-reliant. And all of those things are beneficial, but it can also create these moments where the emotional expression is not always engaged, especially if it feels overwhelming or unfamiliar.
My name is Solius, and here are 7 reasons you should listen to the Folium Diary podcast. 1. The episodes are short. 2. The acting is good, even by the humans. 3. The story is interesting, full of ideas, and also weird. 4. The narrator is charming and funny, or so she says. 5. There are no ads, really. 6. It's better than any other podcast except the one you're listening to now. 7. Because I said so.
So this can be very confusing for a child who may have a hands-on parent and one who may just be a little bit avoidant in the way that they present parenting. So what I was describing beforehand, and I'm going to use an example as a parent who has an avoidant behavioral aspect and wanting their children to be independent. Well, if you have a parent who encourages, who says, take your time, all of the things, and you have a parent who said, no, you need to be independent, that creates a dichotomy of confusion where the child wants to honor both parents, but you have one parent, because they show up very independent in their thinking, they don't need nobody, all of the things that a child feels as if they have to pick one. And mainly to be independent, because independence is a part of maturity and growing up. And so you may put a child in a space where not understanding fully what that looks like means that they'll severely step into not needing direction from parents and try to step into independence and lose themselves completely, because the avoidant parent who teaches that so regularly and tells a child that their independence is important will spin a child into a place of out of control where they don't really understand what independence looks like from a person who is trying to tell them, I need you to be more independent. I hope that made sense. So again, if I'm wanting or needing my child to be independent and they have not even stepped into that role, because independence is something for most people, if that's nothing that you do, you have to curate that step by step. And so if I'm the type of parent who is dogmatic in telling my child, I need you to be independent, and I cut the cord because another parent is kind of cushioning you, that creates instability within that child. And so they don't know by definition what independence looks like, because you keep telling them, well, I need you to be self-reliant. I need you to take control of situations. I need you to think for yourself. I need you to do all of the things. It creates chaos. And I think the hardest part about the avoidant attachment styles is in romantic relationships. Because in the beginning, things may feel like, it's okay, it's going. But then as expectations increase and the emotional attachment and closeness grows, it may feel like there's a need to create space. And this can look like pulling back from communication. You'll begin to avoid certain conversations or needing more alone time, especially after moments of emotional intensity. And when you are paired with someone who leans anxious, this dynamic can become very, very hard to maintain. Because listen, we already talked about anxious. They need some form of answers. They need clarity. They need reassurance. And so when you have a person who has an avoidant attachment style, child, it's like y'all one running towards the other and the other one is running away. That's the dynamic. And it's not to say that in relationships an anxious and avoidant dynamic does not work, but it has to come to a commonality in communication. So you can meet each other in the middle by understanding that a person who has an anxious attachment style, again, is looking for clarity and reassurance. The one who has the avoidant attachment style has to make sure that even in their innate pulling back from situations that may become emotional or feel too weighty, that they must reassure the person that they still love them, that they still care, that they are still present. And the person who is anxious, right, and gets in a tizzy because the person seems to pull back, they have to be in the space of understanding that this is the way that this person shows up, but it doesn't mean abandonment. All right, so under the umbrella of relationships, again, friendships, familyships, loving relationships, parentships, I want to close the gap into if you know that you are under anxious or avoidant, how to partner and how to communicate with people who are under these attachment styles, either anxious or avoidant. Because, there is a dynamic shift. And when something changes in that relationship, many times the anxious partner is going to feel it first. And so instead of you as the anxious person reacting immediately, I need you to pause long enough to clearly communicate what it feels like. At the same time, the avoidant partner will recognize that this type of moment, it requires some form of presence, even if it may feel uncomfortable to them. So instead of pulling away, I need y'all to stay engaged. Even if that engagement is slow, right? Some form of engagement has to happen. We also have to be very honest about our capacity, because sometimes people understand their attachment style, but they are not willing to adjust how they show up. And see, we can't have awareness without adjustment, because you'll keep being and going and spinning into the same type of cycle. So if you lean anxious, you cannot expect someone to regulate your emotions for you every time you feel uncertain. And if you feel avoidant, you cannot expect someone to feel secure with you while you remain emotionally unstable. Both of y'all have to meet in the middle. So it's merely changing the language and conversation. So when the anxious says to the avoidant, I feel a distance between us and I'd like to talk about it, the avoidant, as reassurance, doesn't need to run away, right? Doesn't need to feel the weight of what is said in that slight opening of conversation. They just need to meet with, I understand what you're feeling. I'm open to talk about it, even if it's uncomfortable. Because again, avoidance like control when it comes to their space, their identity, how they want to move into a situation or a conversation. And anxious also wants to control, but they need control through reassurance. And on both parties, it could work. But there has to be a meeting of the minds where both are open to really communicating and also naming their capacity. And many times, many recognize that they don't have the space, perhaps, to fulfill the desire of one. So a person who has an anxious attachment style may recognize that because an avoidant needs their space or doesn't need as much communication or backs up regularly, that sends them in overdrive. And on the other part, an avoidant may recognize that a person who is anxious, they cannot give enough reassurance in order to make this person feel settled. And so perhaps the relationship doesn't work. If that's, a loving type of relationship in friendship, they may recognize that they are two good people, but perhaps because of the dynamic, it is simply hard for them to continue on into a friendship. And I think the most costly is in parenting, where you recognize that you may have an avoidant parent and the child, because of constant reassurance, needs that. So they may find reassurance in another parent or someone else. And also, if a child is avoidant and they have an anxious parent, the anxious parent becomes wanting to find answers on how to meet that child where they are, where they want to be recognized as being a loving and attentive parent, while the avoidant child is just seeing it as, I'm okay, I'm fine. There are so many levels to where, and we can go into like this long stint of anxious attachment and avoidant attachment, and it's not to beat up or try to define you in a way where it makes you feel perhaps bad about the way you show up. It's just an educational segment to help you understand that this is just the way that you show up, but there are also things that you can do underneath that, and identifying who you are and going forward into relationships. Our attachment styles and the forming of our attachment styles has a lot to do with how our parents parent or our caretakers parented us. And sometimes it is biological. You may just have both parents or one parent who identifies this way, and biologically you take on that behavioral pattern. Again, it does not make you a bad person. It's just set up for you to recognize what type of person you are and to move forward. I think that the more knowledge that we know about ourselves, and again, I try to move away from labels, because sometimes labels just seem so, they seem to be finite, where there is no flexibility around it, but there is. So if you find yourself being anxious or avoidant, recognize where your bandwidth and your capacity is and move forward. And sometimes anxious have anxious friends, and they get along quite well because there's an expectation that there is clarity between the way that they show up. And many times avoidant have avoidant friends because there is an understanding as to way they show up, and it's perfectly fine. We are all different. We will never be the same, but it is important for us to understand the people around our world, how we can communicate, how we can love them better, how we can show up for them better, and, just naming parts of who we are.
Greeting, Miss Marie. I'm recording this message because there's something I want to share with you about my childhood. I don't talk about this too often. I grew up learning how to be responsible, reliable, independent at a very early age. I had to handle things on my own. Some parts were hurtful, just feeling lonely. An only child living with one parent. I still see that little girl inside me. Sometimes I wonder, do I need safety and understanding on how to protect my love, myself, and how careful I am with my heart? I know That's why I value my peace so much. I protect my dreams. I have become strong and self-reliant. I turn pain into meaning. I'm sharing this with you because I listen to your podcast. Just listening, I learned to honor my story instead of minimizing it. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. I really appreciate it. Have an amazing forever life.
Thank you for that message, such an honest and vulnerable message. I think many people will resonate with that. The little girl that you spoke about, the one that had to, grow up very early. She recognized that there was a place of adapting, but she had to survive as well. And what I hear in this woman is her awareness. Because when you say that you still see her, that means that you didn't abandon the little girl because she grew up. And a lot of people do. They outgrow their pain without ever going back to understand it. And I think that part is important, that we understand exactly who we are in every facet of our life. There's an important part where you said, I see why I protect my peace. I see why I'm careful with my heart. And in many ways, I would even say that that's wise and that is wisdom. Being aware of ourselves. And on the onset, many people would say, well, from the experiences, there is a protection and a guarding that she has that can show up in a way where she does not allow other people to come in. But I think one of the things that's instrumental in us knowing who we are based on our experiences, and also with knowing how we cope and live in this life, is that if my protection and guarding my heart means that I have to do so because I know that I have an open heart and a willingness to love each and every person, I also have to guard it in some ways because I can easily fall victim in allowing someone to come in. And sometimes we have to guard ourselves in order to not feel the weight of disappointment, because one thing about disappointment is it's weighty for some people, and others it's like, it is what it is. And so we have to maintain a sense of stability and recognizing how that affects us. And even to add, when a person grows up early, sometimes that strength, they recognize that it needs to be held, it needs to be understood, and it also needs to be supported. So I just wanted to add that you are allowed, to be as soft as you need to. You're allowed to receive whatever it is that you need. You are allowed to not have it all figured out at the time. I mean, this is a process of life, and even trying to understand so much at a young age, that takes a lot. And that little girl in you, she doesn't need just protection. She also needs permission to just rest. To just rest and know that it's okay. And I am so proud of you for not minimizing your story. Because honestly, and this speaks for all of us, the moment that we minimize who we are, you begin to minimize yourself. And I want you to keep honoring yourself, your story, and the way that you show up in this world, because it's important. Now, last but not least, we got a little announcements from the floor. All right, so if you are in the St. Louis and Chicago area, baby, let me say this gently, my baby is coming to you. May 29th is St. Louis. May 31st is Chicago. I'm excited about it. I would love for you to be in the room. And to just give you a little bit without a spoiler or, any of the sorts. It is, a poetic reflection of categorical things that we have all gone through. And so it is poetry, but it's also talk. And so we dive into some very emotionally driven talks and pieces but we also identify the love that is shared in the room. And so I want to create an experience of safety, of love. And I also want, people to feel and know that they are covered under the building, under the words, under just the presence of people who identify as you. And so, if that's something that you are interested in, please go to my website, www.seasondialogue.com. Check out the dates and also, purchase a ticket or two. All right, well, that's enough for me, my babies. I'm going to see y'all next week with another episode, and we're going to finish out with the other two attachment styles. All right, bye-bye.